Hello and welcome. My name is Carolyn Buckley, and I'm the layout editor for the IAPR newsletter. I'm here representing the 50th Anniversary Committee. You'll hear more about them at the end of this talk. To fully appreciate our beginnings 50 years ago, we should start by going back in time to the mid-1960s, about 60 years ago, when pattern recognition research was relatively young. Everyday items looked different. But still, the general public in 2024 would recognize these items and can probably tell you the function of each one. That's not true for the general-purpose computers of the 1960s. This Honeywell computer might look like a refrigerator with controls on the door, but its magnetic core memory was state-of-the-art in 1965. As was the Bryant Model 2 with its giant rotating magnetic disks, each 1 meter in diameter, with up to 205 megabytes of disk storage total. And these machines were heavy. Just 128 kilobytes of memory in the 1960s averaged about 600 pounds. But we can thank systems like these and the determined researchers who worked on them for the growth of pattern recognition as a field of research. Because in spite of the clunky machinery, the field did grow. By 1966, IEEE sponsored the first formal pattern recognition meeting at the Dorado Hilton in Puerto Rico, which is now the Embassy Suites Hilton. Just 10 years before that, the term artificial intelligence had been coined at the Dartmouth Summer Workshop of '56. But back then, as now, things moved quickly, and by the 1970s there were several new conferences on machine intelligence. Each one categorized pattern recognition work in different ways, so that with the technology of the time, no one could easily browse the latest PR research. Based on recorded IAPR history, in 1971 London, at the Second International Joint Conference on AI, quote, an attempt to incorporate pattern recognition into the artificial intelligence field broke down, end quote. We don't know how or why. But that was the motivation for Professor King-Sun Fu to call for a committee to organize a repeating international pattern recognition conference. The next 6 years were foundational for IAPR. A lot happened during that time, but we'll just look at a few highlights from the years leading up to the founding of the IAPR in 1978. The first meeting of Professor Fu's conference committee took place in February of 1972 at Airlie House in Warrenton, Virginia. In a stroke of genius suggesting they knew this would be an important event that might someday end up in a PowerPoint presentation, attendees signed this souvenir postcard. Someone must have written IAPR organizing meeting on it later because, as far as we know, the name IAPR had not yet been considered. Regardless, this was an ambitious group, and by the end of October 1973, the first IJCPR was held at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, D.C. It was called a joint conference because of the co-sponsorship of several important scientific organizations, which are easier to see on the title page of the proceedings. The ACM, the Computer Society, IEEE, the IFIP, the Optical Society of America, now called Optica, the Pattern Recognition Society, and the SPIE, or Society of Photographic Instrumentation Engineers, now Photonics and Optics. If you think pulling together this many sponsors for an international conference in 20 months, in the days before email was widely available, is impressive, let's go back to the timeline and see what happened next. The main international AI conference was held in odd-numbered years, so the committee wanted the PR conferences to be in even years. Rather than wait 3 years, they planned the second IJCPR for August of 1974, less than 10 months after the first. It was held near Copenhagen, Denmark, and it was, based on the number of papers and attendance, even more successful than the 1973 conference. And there was a ladies' program. More on that later. After the second IJCPR, with the future of the organization on solid footing, committees began working on the transition to a permanent organization for pattern recognition researchers. About a year later, in September 1975, the Conference and Reorganization Committees had come to a near agreement on a constitution. To avoid confusion with the Pattern Recognition Society, Herb Freeman, vice chairman of the conference committee at the time, suggested the name International Association for Pattern Recognition. But in April of 1976, with plans for the third IJCPR well underway, one very important point in the Constitution was still not resolved. That was the question of membership. Would the IAPR be made up of member societies from different nations, also remaining open to individuals? Or should it be comprised entirely of individual members, with possible National Society affiliations? So a double version of the Constitution describing both options was sent to the Standing Committee members for their opinion. They preferred option 1, which was incorporated into the final draft. The Constitution was formally adopted at the third IJCPR in November 1976, at the first meeting of the IAPR Executive Committee. It was at the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego where, among other things, the first EXCO also agreed to begin publishing a periodic IAPR newsletter. More on that later. They also selected a bylaws committee, which worked quickly, because by May of 1977, a second draft of the bylaws was approved by the Standing Committee. Then, thanks to efforts by Herb Freeman, we received an important letter with the New York State Department official seal, recognizing IAPR as a not-for-profit organization. In August of that year, the first edition of the IAPR newsletter was published. Its cover matched the design of the 1976 IJCPR proceedings, which was similar in some ways to the 1974 cover. The swirl pattern was incorporated into our logo and has been on every newsletter cover in one way or another ever since. Here's a quick glance at the changes in the newsletter's appearance over the years. These samples were taken about every 5 years. There's summer 2020, and October 24 is the most recent issue at the time of this recording. By the way, if you're not getting an email with a link to the IAPR newsletter 4 times a year, just enter IAPR News in your search bar, download the latest issue, and click on the red subscribe button. It's on the cover of every issue. Back to the timeline. 3 months after the first newsletter, the fourth IJCPR was held in Kyoto, Japan, where the Executive Committee unanimously voted to accept the Membership Committee's recommendations, and 13 national organizations, plus 4 individuals, officially became the founding members of the IAPR. Their 19 representatives met the very next day as our first governing board, or GB. This photo was taken at that conference. From left to right are Herb Freeman, about to become the second president of the IAPR, and King Sun-Fu, the founding president, together with Toshiyuki Sakai and Theodosius Pavlidis, the chair and the program chair for the 4th and 5th conferences, respectively. We should take a moment to feel some gratitude for their service and their hard work planning those early conferences. Remember that they did that work on computers built in the 1970s, when the term user-friendly meant you had a keyboard. The second issue of the IAPR newsletter contained perhaps the most concise and visionary summary of the 4th conference. Those of us who were in Kyoto came away with a feeling that pattern recognition has now, without doubt, become a major scientific/engineering discipline. Before we leave Kyoto and the founding timeline behind, let's take a closer look at the ladies program I mentioned earlier. Things were different back then, and ladies programs were a regular feature of scientific conferences. So what were they? On page 22 of the invitation to Kyoto, we find out. Yes, that's right. It was 2 sightseeing programs for the ladies, primarily spouses. So let's leave that timeline at 1978 and talk about how we've grown since then. Obviously, and perhaps most important, and to our greatest benefit, more women have joined IAPR, not only as participating researchers but also in leadership roles. The 6-member EXCO included 2 women for a 10-year period from 2010 to 2020. The percent women on standing committees has steadily increased. There's a slower increase for governing board members and a less consistent increase in women leading our technical committees. In January 2001, our newsletter cover was a message from our first woman president, Gabriela Saniti de Baja. And Ingela Nystrom was our second woman president, starting in 2014. This is a rather difficult graph to read, but if we combine the data across committee types, we see that in general things are improving. But the fact that we've finally hit the 25% mark for women leaders this year suggests that we must do more to invite women into leadership roles. In fact, there's a pretty good article about that in our most recent newsletter. But aside from an increase in women among our membership and our leadership, how else have we grown? A video showing our global growth is available on our 50th anniversary webpage. But a quick look at the evolution of our organizational structure also illustrates our growth. In 1978, we started with 19 representatives from 13 member societies on the GB. Just as they do now, they selected our executive committee, which included the chairs of the current and subsequent ICPR conferences. 3 subcommittees worked on publications, conferences, and membership. The grand total, including the GB, was fewer than 40 people. Fast forward nearly 50 years to 2024, and the GB has 62 representatives from 48 national societies. The organizational structure is basically the same, with a few changes and additions. EXCO titles changed just after the 1978 conference. We now retain the past president as an EXCO member to assure smooth transitions. We still have the original 3 standing committees, and more have been added over the years. The names of 2 of those committees have changed slightly. In addition to the standing committees, we now have occasional ad hoc committees assembled for specific tasks, such as the Hybrid Conferences Committee, formed to create a best practices guide, and the 50th Anniversary Committee, which created the 50th Anniversary logo and is bringing you this presentation. As of October 2024, we have 16 technical committees. These have blended and changed over the years, so their numbers are no longer continuous. Contact information for all these committees can easily be found at iapr.org/committees. In conclusion, we set out about 50 years ago to create an international organization that would support collaboration among pattern recognition researchers. How have we done? Through hard work and strong leadership, past and present, I'd say we've done quite well. This is just a small sample of the numbers that support that conclusion. But some of these numbers are very conservative estimates. They're based on our best records, some of which only go back to 2002. And here's where you come in. The 50th Anniversary Committee would like your help gathering historical documents, pictures from conferences, anything you feel can contribute to our upcoming celebrations at ICPR 2026 and 2028. We are particularly interested in information and items that are not available online. If you have something, please scan this code, which will take you to our 50th Anniversary webpage, where you can learn more. Or email us at 50th@iapr.org with your ideas and suggestions. Thank you so much for your attention.